And here we go. Just to start sharing my my screen here with you, and here we go. We are off. So welcome everyone to today's webinar. As Tedopres /Etteplan, we do about one or two every month about the different aspects of technical information. And today's webinar is going to be about a case study on the successful implementation of simplified technical English in the medical industry. In the case of Elekta, it's going to be about EASE, which actually stands for Elekta-Approved Simplified English, which I did mention in previous webinars. We're actually going to have a look on the actual implementation there. The agenda for today is I'm going to have a brief talk, just a few minutes about the presenters today, then a little bit about the companies, short explanation about what Simplified Technical English is, and then straight into the case study, and then followed by, last but not least, the questions and answers session. So, a little bit about myself. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director here at Etteplan /Tedopres. We were actually Tedopres, a technical documentation firm specialized in all assets of technical documentation, writing, authoring, illustrations, translations in over 50 languages, you name it. And we actually got acquired about a year ago by Etteplan. And actually, I'll talk to you a little bit more about that firm. But my role is that I'm the Sales and Marketing Director there, and I've been helping and assisting companies, including Elekta, with the implementation of standards like Simplified Technical English for their technical documentation purposes. Sherry, who is going to be talking to you most of the session, actually is the manager of the technical writing department at the software division at Elekta. Elekta actually is a human care company pioneering significant innovations and clinical solutions for treating cancer and brain disorders. And Sherry's been with Elekta for over 12 years now, but has a background in over 20 years as a manager and as a technical writer. And then she can talk a little bit more about that later on, but she started using Simplified Technical English in early 2008, which actually, since we are 4 or 5 years down the road now, gives her a very good background in discussing what went wrong and what went right and the challenges, etc., etc. A little bit about Etteplan. As part of Etteplan, we are now actually a specialist in providing full end-to-end solutions on engineering and technical product information solutions. So not just technical information anymore, but we are able to provide you with solutions that cover end-to-end the full product life cycle. We've been doing that combined for over 40 years. Over 1,800 designers and specialists, and 350 of those actually are technical documentation specialists. So we kind of are like yourselves if you are in the technical writing community, assuming that you are, and with over 350 people we're actually practicing what we preach, as we also use Simplified Technical English on a day-to-day basis. Quite large in Europe. Head office of Etteplan Tedopres is in the Netherlands. Head office of Etteplan itself is in Finland, but we have offices around the world. We're based actually in Austin, Texas, in the United States, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Russia, and we also have about 100 folks in China, allowing us to provide offshoring services for those who are interested. And then we are actually a trademark company. So the services that we do, we're going to mainly be discussing this little guy over here, technical product information today, but we would be able to help you out on all aspects that you can see here. If you have any questions on that, then feel free to email me afterwards. A little bit about Simplified English. We actually Simplified English actually is based on the model that we use for our clients, the model that should be used in technical documentation. Not are we just talking about Simplified English, but we should be using standards like Simplified English in all aspects of technical documentation. there are methodologies, for instance, to apply single sourcing for illustrations, which I've done a webinar on a couple of months ago, and we still have a link available in case you would like to see that. But not just simplified English, not just simplified illustrations. On the creation side, you also should be able to manage that by applying XML, of course. And Sherry can maybe even briefly touch base on that, as this was the use of Simplified English was actually part of a full data implementation process, a full global management process. But once you do that, you are not only able to have your information created and managed in a very efficient way, you also set your information up to be published in a very efficient way to applications like, for instance, tablets, like iPads, for instance, these days. So the use of universal standards is something that we call the Tedopres model. And the part of the model is then the use of a controlled language, which actually is what Simplified Technical English is. It originally was developed in the aerospace and defense industries in the early 80s, but actually today it's widely being used in other industries as well, because, well, if you're going to do this, why would you reinvent the wheel? You know, you can use the standard as a basis for your controlled language efforts and then apply flexibility, even style guides, etc., to fulfill your controlled language needs. But what it in essence is, STE, as I'd like to call it, is it actually improves the clarity of technical writing. By sticking with the need to know, getting rid of the nice to know, applying one word can only have one meaning, is reducing not only ambiguity, it sets you up for less words, translation cost savings, and many more other benefits. The sentence that I always use in my presentations is turn off the engines not required. It's a perfectly English sentence from a grammar point of view, for instance. However, the problem is ambiguity. It could mean turning off the engines is not required, but it could also mean that turning off the engines, only turn off those engines that are not required. Two big difference, and of course, if they can have these different types of meanings, you can see what that can do, not only for the end user, but for your translations as well. If you have to translate a sentence like turn off the engines not required into, well, these days at least 20 to 30 different languages, then how are you going to be able to control and make sure that the correct translation or the correct meaning was translated? It's very hard if you do not apply a controlled language. So it's important that we do so. We're not trying to win the Pulitzer Prize when writing documentation. We're trying to make sure that our end users understand what we're trying to tell them. The steps for implementation, and very briefly, it is very necessary. We actually wrote a white paper on this. We did some research on this as well. It's very important that you go through all three steps. You cannot just buy a software application and then assume it's going to do the work for you. Checker tools are out there, but what you need to do is use checker tools for what they're made for, which is checking. The authority always remains with the writer because he or she knows what they're trying to write down, the meaning of the sentence, right? So in that aspect, it's very important that you train your writers on the writing rules. There's 2 to 3 day courses that we provide in that regard, even train the trainer, but Sherry can touch base on that. And then, of course, it's also important that you standardize on your corporate terminology. If you, for instance, in a particular manual, one page, I once saw that a writer was using the word system, device, unit, apparatus, product, and etc. But if you would look at the content, he would actually use the same words or different words with the exact same meaning. And that's not what we're trying to do here. Because, of course, it's going to be clear for you as a writer, but not for the end user. You're going to confuse people. So standardize your corporate terminology. One word can only have one meaning. Train your writers on the writing rules, and then use checker software for quality assurance, quality measurement, so that you're allowed to quicker do your work and therefore decrease the time to market. HyperSTE is our tool. It's the leading checker software for content quality. It's available actually as a plugin into most authoring environments. So that means that within Microsoft Word or FrameMaker or Arbitext or XMetal, InDesign for that matter, you have a plugin, a drop-down menu that checks the text for compliance with not just the use of controlled authoring, but also to make sure that everyone uses consistent terminology. And then HyperSTE Generic actually is a standalone desktop version. Some of our customers, you can see that quite a bit are in aerospace and defense because it's actually a mandated standard there because of safety issues, obviously. But you can also see that HyperSTE allows for quite a bit of flexibility for companies that are not in the aerospace and defense industry and still use STE as a solid base for their controlled language efforts. Companies in various industries around the world would be using HyperSTE. Last thing before I turn it over to Sherry is that we offer free content reality checks. So that means that we challenge you to provide us with some sample content, and we'll create a small business case for you. We'll do that at no cost, just to show you what the problems could be and give you insight on the type of cost savings that can potentially be obtained, for instance from a translation point of view, but just also looking at the overall efficiency of your documentation process in general. So, and in order to do that, you can send an email to ste@tedopres.com, 1S, or just view for more information, go to any of these particular websites. If you want to get to know a little bit more about the full aspect of Etteplan, then feel free to visit the website as well, and be happy to talk to you more about that. So ste@tedopres.com is your email address for you to contact us with any questions that you may get, and also to request a link to the recorded webinar. So that being said, I'm going to switch it over to you, Sherry. I'm assuming you're still with us?
Yes.
Oh, there you are.
Thanks,
okay.
Sarah.
Yeah, feel free. You should be able to share your desktop with us, and feel free and do that at any time. And then the digital floor, I should say, is yours.
Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me okay, Barry?
Yeah, can hear you perfectly. Thanks.
And can you see my desktop?
Absolutely.
Okay. So hi, everyone. As Barry said, I'm here to talk about and share with you our implementation of Simplified English. So Barry already touched on this, but basically Elekta is a medical device company. Our focus is on developing clinical solutions for treating cancer and brain disorders. In our business area, we develop mostly software products that streamline all activities in an oncology clinic, from diagnosis and treatment to follow-up. So in early 2007, maybe it even started in 2006, we started seriously looking at factors affecting how we develop and publish user documentation. A lot of things were happening at that time. Elekta was changing organizationally and technologically. We were growing through acquisitions, which also changed the regulatory landscape because of reasons like installing in new countries. We were investing heavily in technology, and there were many driving needs to take advantage of new technologies for developing user documentation. Some of the major issues driving the need for change that I'm sure many of you face were the mountain of words that continue to grow, the high costs of translations, developing information that is difficult to maintain and use, different versions of the same information across different document types, and foreign language users find it difficult to understand the documentation for all of these reasons. Just not having consistency in terminology causes this, as we all know. Here's a statistic from around the January 2010 time. And why I'm showing this is one of the main reasons why we were able to pursue and fund this project, because of the high costs of translations. And this is also why we got support for our project from top down, which is really key in driving a project like this to completion. One of our first steps we took was to develop a documentation strategy. So we started by research and benchmarking. You know, how do we modernize our documentation? How do we respond to the company changes and how they affect our doc teams globally? We actually did take the time and go through and analyze leading results from leading analysts in the field. Here to mention a few. In analyzing the results here, this slide shows some of our key findings. You know, authoring assistance at content creation, so that we're already creating information ready to be localized. Centralized terminology management, I'll get into a little bit of that, but this is key in improving documentation efforts. Structured document and content management tools. We also have a technical illustrator on our hardware side of the business, and so we looked at better tools for him as well. And you know, mostly the biggest benefit for us, well, there were many big benefits. So one of them is to be able to reuse our information. From the results, we started to identify our strategy. The main components of our strategy are Simplified Technical English, Structured Authoring in XML, implementing a component content management system globally. We decided to take a three-phased approach to this. So our first step, and what I'm going to focus on today, is to implement our version of Simplified English. And we got started on this in 2008. But we were still training and taking care of all the things you need to before an actual implementation. So I would say that the writers really got started implementing Simplified English in 2009, early 2009. Second approach is to implement structured authoring in XML. And third, our main goal was to have all the authors developing user content in a global content management system. So we realized right from the beginning that in order to make this successful and give it the visibility that we needed across all functional teams, not just the doc teams, was to make it a global strategy. So we came up with global information management system and really started getting word out on this project right from the start in 2008, 2009. Simply put, the Global Information Management System initiative is a strategy to change the way we develop, deploy, and deliver information globally. So our Global Information Management solution included implementing the HyperSTE tool from Tedopres, data for structured authoring in XML, and did a CMS system from Ixiasoft for the component content management system globally. We worked with Tedopres. Well, Tedopres developed for us XMAX, which is a version of HyperSTE right in our content management system. And we have output for PDF through a FrameMaker server. Customization to corporate and metadata, and we developed a taxonomy right in the user interface of the content management system. And again, integrating the HyperSTE functionality into XMAX, which is the tool for the HyperSTE tool again. Some of the reasons we went with Tedopres, because we did explore several tools, of course, is we found it easy to, we do find it easy to use. It's a, Tedopres provided support for Word, FrameMaker, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, XML are in our content management system. They made it customizable. And they also gave us a lot of initial support in building our dictionary, which is really key to the implementation of Simplified English. And we took advantage of their train the trainer, because this allowed us to learn how they see we should implement the tool and then customize that and adapt it to what we do here at Elekta, and then train all the technical writers in all of the different business areas on our implementation. So as I stated, our first phase was to implement Simplified English, provide authoring assistance to create content that is ready for localization, have a centralized terminology management system, and our main goals were to reduce our word count by approximately 35%, and this was like within the last 4 years of implementation, and improve readability and avoid confusion. The first is easier to measure, but we still do our doc surveys to try to get information on the improved readability of our documentation sets. So getting started, we had one person from each business area globally join a global information management team and met regularly. We completed, again, that Tedopres Train the Trainer course, and we built our dictionary of terminology for all Elekta products and for medical terminology in our field, which this is an ongoing process. And we also agreed to having a staggered approach to implementation so that we could learn from the business area who goes before us. And of course, we trained the doc teams globally on our implementation of Simplified English and using the HyperSTE tool. In planning our implementation of Simplified English, we looked at how to build and maintain a global dictionary, how to implement Simplified English without disrupting daily operations. How does this change our current doc processes? Implementing the tool, implementing this new tool, adjusting to writing based on agreed upon vocabulary. We even rewrote our corporate style guide to base it on Simplified English rules. Of course, there are many challenges that come up. Here are a few that we faced. you know, immediately there was some pushback from the tech writers who felt that they were looking at the dictionary as more restrictive instead of looking at it as a way to have consistency across documents in terminology. And I would think that if you spoke with any of them today, they would agree and actually be very enthusiastic about how this has not inhibited their creativity. But that was one of our early challenges. And we all know how technical writers, and especially subject matter experts, reviewers, can be emotionally attached to specific words. In software, we have at least 3 software releases a year, so we're under a lot of, and so it's difficult to go back and forth with the subject matter experts on which term we're using now. That's been a challenge, so we've had to be creative in how we overcome that. And pulling together this centralized terminology management system is a challenge that we continue to get better at because, again, you know, you have daily operations just very busy with what you're trying to accomplish for, you know, revenue for the company. So you are not focused on is the other doc teams coming up with using terminology that we decided we weren't going to. So but meeting regularly, and I'll get into some best practices as to how we overcome this. And collaborating, again, like I was just saying, collaborating on the terminology management, it's a challenge among different regions. So we had to, right from the beginning, decide how were we going to implement our Simplified Technical English and meet our release deadlines. Here are some of the best practices. So right from the inception, we built a terminology list as a collaborative effort. Again, one representative from each business area. We also, in looking back, still find it very valuable to get the subject matter experts involved in this building of the terminology list. Let them feel like they're part of the process, because they are key. They are our key stakeholders, and we do pull the terminology lists together, but then we have them validate it. And of course, if we need them to assist, because a lot of them are clinical, very clinical, they'll assist with defining synonyms and actually editing and reviewing our definitions of these terms that we put into our terminology list. And we also continued development of simplified English skills for our writing teams. We have, in the past, monthly 1-hour workshops. We now have, for a couple of years, a technical editor on board who is only focused on our implementation of Simplified English. She edits the documents of the writers for their implementation of Simplified English, and will give them feedback to improve their efforts. And of course, providing learning aids. We've created quick reference cards for verbs that are approved in the dictionary to use as one example. So, of course, you have to establish ways to communicate with each other globally. So we created an EASE wiki, and in EASE, email distribution lists. So whenever we're discussing, if someone has an issue that they want to bring out globally on their implementation of Simplified English, they use these two vehicles, which, you know, people will respond as they have, if they have the time in their work schedule. And again, assembling the core team to review terms and determine which ones to add to the global dictionary. We created guidelines to qualify terms. And of course, very important to measure progress and share the results with other functional teams, because again, it's key to get them involved in your process, and if you really want to have a successful dictionary terminology management system. Here is a metric that I put together, that actually someone in our other business area, our project management for the whole global information management system, he put this together. I'll give you a minute to take a look at it, and I can bring it back up if you have some questions about it. It was very successful. As you can see, we got a 20% reduction in how many words we were using in that document, a huge reduction in page count, a 66% cost of goods reduction. Some more best practices. You know, we are always, and now our new editor, she's taken this on as a mantra: one word, one meaning, one part of speech. This consistency is so important to implement in Simplified English. Again, I had mentioned earlier, we've updated our global style guide so that it adheres to the Simplified English rules. When we started, we actually had Tedopres, and Barry can tell you more about this if you have questions, do a text mining exercise on our documentation sets so that we had a terminology base to start with in our dictionary. And in the HyperSTE tool, you can actually build user dictionaries right from that tool. So, and it's really easy to use. So while the writers are, if they're challenged with a word choice, which is the biggest challenge because the rules are really just good technical writing practices, and there's 58 of them, I believe. And but it's really the vocabulary that poses the challenge. But they can add the term to their user dictionary, and our process is they submit their dictionaries quarterly to our editor, who goes through the terminology, discusses it with the editor in the other business area, and we begin to build on and improve our terminology list. And whenever we come to the final decision of adding terms to the terminology system, we have the subject matter experts, the reviewers from other functional groups like engineering and product management, review these terms and validate them. And again, these are all the things I just discussed. Create some of the best practices that I highly recommend is that you not just create this Simplified English task force, but make sure you're meeting regularly, because it's really key to exchange, especially when you're doing a global implementation. And you have to continually share what you're doing with other functional areas and get the key stakeholders involved, like whoever the reviewers are of your documentation sets. set the expectation again. This is really key. You really need the support of your reviewers if you're going to be successful in implementing your Simplified English. We actually decided to apply our Simplified English as we going forward. So for example, one of our documentation types is online help. So when we're writing for a new release, if we have to update a help topic, we will apply the HyperSTE to that entire topic. So now we have applied it to legacy information. And of course, now that we're getting into the content management system, we are applying the HyperSTE to all of the information that we are converting to data topics to store in our content management system. And we have had to create many work instructions as we go along. That's key for the writers. We find it very effective because they're very busy and focused on developing the information. So anything we can do to make it easier for them, quick reference cards, work instructions, etc. And so here are the benefits already that we've seen. We have been achieving 30 to 40% savings with our not just our implementation of Simplified English, but also we are fully implemented in our hardware business area with the content management systems, and the technical authors in that business area are already authoring new content in the system. And the slide I showed you with the the metric, it showed a 66 cost of goods reduction in print costs, and also it showed you that 30% page count reduction and 20% word count reduction. So again, here are some of the benefits. They were our goals, and we are seeing this as all of these benefits realized. Any questions for us?
Sure. Thank you very much, Sherry. Really helpful, the insight. I have a few questions maybe on my own, but I'm going to ask everyone to I see that a few are raising their hands. Can you please use the question box on the bottom to start adding questions, please? And then I'm going to change the presenter back to actually, why don't we just keep using yours here, Sherry, because there may be people going back and forth about any of the slides that you have there. So, okay, we have a question coming in from Mike. Actually, quite a few questions coming in now. Let me go ahead and see if I can. How many technical writers are in the company, Sherry?
In my business area, there are 14 tech writers, 1 tech editor. In the other business area, I think there's 30 of us.
So
globally.
30 technical writers in globally, and how many people overall in the company? Someone else is asking. Yvonne?
Oh. I don't have that number.
Okay. Well, but about
yeah, I'm sorry.
30 technical writers, basically.
Yeah, you would think that, but we are a global company, so I don't know if there's a way to post that, or I could, if you're interested, it's definitely on www.elekta.com.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. I think then Mike is asking, Mike Nwala, another Simplified English expert in the UK, I believe. What are the differences between ease and the ASD, Simplified Technical English. I can maybe talk about that, but maybe you want to give your view on that as well, Sherry?
Well, I would say mostly the terminology, because you know, we had to adapt this for the medical field. So we had to add a lot of medical terminology. We also had to add a lot of software terminology to the dictionary. And Tedopres has also, you know, assisted with that, and they now have more software terminology as well. So Jerry can talk to that.
Yeah, sure. Now, and I have a question on that as well, because obviously you're talking, you mentioned it, hardware and software. Of course, the word save in hardware means something else than save in software. The same with load, for instance. You load something into the truck, that's hardware, and then you load your software, which is obviously software. So how were you dealing with those aspects?
Well, we determine which tool will work best, and we try not to have the same. So we would keep load for the hardware, and we would say install for the software. And again, in the dictionary, and I don't know if you want to get into more specifics about this for them, Barry, but
you're right.
You have approved and unapproved terms. So while the writer is in there, they usually do a page check with the HyperSTE tool after they've written their information, and it will highlight terminology that's not approved and give them actual examples of what is approved.
Correct. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Well, thanks for that. It was just a personal question I had, because we do find that sometimes people saying like, okay, well, that's hardware, but what about software? Software usually, on my point of view, is that it's a relatively much newer industry than any other industry, and you usually get a lot more words there because it's new. People tend to invent more words as they go along. You know, a few years ago, no one would be using the word Google, but now it's a verb in any language. You know, so it's important to be able to control on that aspects as well. Okay, let me see if there are any other questions. Let me see. Oh, someone else looked it up. There you go. There's around 3,300 employees globally at Elekta.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah. Another question is, how do you get engineers to adopt the same terminology in the product? So basically the SMEs.
Oh, well, we do have a project going on to run our code through HyperSTE. So we're working on that. There's like 40,000 components to this that we have to do. One of the things that is happening that's very exciting and has been actually going on now for 2.5 years, the engineers come to my tech writing team and say, look, we have a new warning message. Can please edit that and put it in simplified English. And then
great.
They edit it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we work really closely. You know, at first, you know, people were skeptical back in like 2009, but everyone understands the benefits of this now. When, you know, it does make much clearer writing for everybody. So.
Yeah, that's great. You usually have a big learning curve, mainly on the SME side, because, like you mentioned, great professionalists, but usually also very emotionally attached to their words, right? So yeah, it's something that is quite common. So it's really nice to hear that people are really getting into that aspect. So another question is, and it should maybe be the last one: are there situations where a technical communicator cannot conform to ease, and if you have any examples?
We do. No, to answer the question, but some writers are able to implement it much easier than others, and that was one of the reasons I wrote the business case and brought on a technical editor. And the writers who were, I don't want to say struggling, but they were a bit resistant, and they were having difficulty mainly with implementing the, I don't want to say restricted vocabulary, but the agreed upon vocabulary. The editor works very closely with them to
Very good. Yeah.
improve, and we have seen improvements, and they also are more enthusiastic about it.
Great, great.
Most tech writers are on board with this. They see the value, and again, it's not creative writing. We're trying to make information accessible to users. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's very important to get them on board from the start and keep them posted. Otherwise, you're going to get resistance, right? Or
absolutely, yes.
Okay. One last question. How do you deal with translations to complex languages that do not share our alphabet? Do you have any of those languages that you translate to, or?
Yeah, we do. We actually even translate our GUI now, the software GUI, into many languages. What kind of challenges do you think this person means? Because we actually have a coordinator for our translations. So we're implementing Simplified English, and then we send the doc set to the coordinator. And then whoever's, usually we get a lot of questions from the validators. We also have in-house validators that validate the translated set.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a question from Clover Koopman. Maybe you want to elaborate on that, but let me see. Use of one word with many meanings in Chinese, for instance. Well, the thing is, Clover, I can maybe even answer that for you, Cherry, is that if one word has one meaning, it's not just that one word having that one meaning. You have to see it in its context, and the context will then determine the true meaning in that other language. Even though in the English it's very clear and concise, whether you are translating to Chinese or Arabic, for that matter, is going to then be determined by the translator, who, because of the Simplified English as a source, it's much easier for that person to determine how to translate it, because it was not ambiguous in the first place. Now, you would have a problem, of course, if you're just going to provide a word to the translator, because yes, then he would have to say, okay, well, what different meaning would, there's different meanings to this in Chinese. But if you would just focus on it, you would look at it in the context, which is something that translation memory software allows you to do also these days, then really the problem solves itself. And then if there's any further feedback coming from the field, like Sherry just mentioned, then that's a validation process that you also need to include. But by having the source in ease, or in Simplified English for that matter, it really solves a lot of these issues. And I would almost guess, Sherry, but maybe you can confirm that, that you would get a lot less questions back from your validators because it's clear in the first place.
Exactly. As I said in my short presentation, it's just very key to make sure all of these different functional teams understand your goals. Yeah. And not just understand, but understand the benefits to them as well, because the ultimate benefit is to our customers. So the validators also understand those goals. So I would hope that the translated documents also are adhering to the one word, one meaning in the specific language.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Okay, well, thank you so much, Sherry. We had a 45-minute presentation which went over a little over time right now, but if you have any further questions, and Clover thanks you for your answer, Sherry. So if you have any further questions, I'm going to go ahead and change the presenter to myself again. And I'm going to share my screen with you and go ahead and go to the contact page. For any questions that you have, please let us know at ste@tedopres.com. I can forward you the details of our contacts over in the US to answer any questions you may have. Again, we would urge you to have us do a free content reality check, as we would like to call it, on your content, to see how the use of Simplified English and HyperSTE would be able to provide you with cost savings and efficiency in the technical information processes. So, Sherry, I want to personally thank you very much again for your contribution. I know it's what time is it now over there? Close to 9 a.m. I would assume. And thank you all for attending. Sherry, again, thanks a lot. And
oh, you're welcome. Everyone have a nice day or evening wherever you are in your day.
Yeah.
Thank
exactly.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, Mary.
Bye, Sherry, and thanks everyone. And we'll talk again soon in the next webinar. Thank you. Bye bye.